What's the crack, everyone? It's Ollie from B2B Sports here. Welcome to the 2023 Minnesota Vikings season review. Not the way that Minnesota Vikings fans wanted the 2023 season to go down. Finished with a record of 7-10. It was a real rollercoaster of emotions, and of course it had to be with the Vikings. You could really divide the season up into three parts, really. That terrible 0-3 start, then the 5 straight wins in a row, and then the back end of the season where we just weren't good enough. We just fell off completely, checked out at the end of the season. Not enough fight, not enough passion, and those injuries eventually caught up on us a little bit. Really gutted, to be honest. It was such a promising season. Obviously had Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator, looking to really build on last year and on the record that we created for ourselves, but to try and strengthen that and try and create a really confident and fearful team going into the playoffs. That was the aim. It didn't start that way, that's for sure. I'll do a little bit of a run through of the games and a couple of key moments in the season. So the season started off against the Buccaneers. It was a sloppy start to the season. The Vikings lost 20-17 in the end. And the real theme at the start of the season and the latter end part of the season was turnovers. The turnovers plagued the Minnesota Vikings and was the main contributing factor to why we lost so many games this year. Kirk and the offense was flat. 3 turnovers in the first game, a couple of interceptions from Kirk. The rookie, Jordan Addison, looked bright. He had a touchdown in his first game. JJ looked like JJ always does, 150 yards. But we allowed Baker Mayfield to dominate. I think I remember one point in the game, he stiff-armed a member of the Minnesota Vikings defense and really stamped his authority, and you can't be having that. So yeah, the Vikings looked flat. They didn't look prepared. They didn't look ready for the season ahead. And it was a disappointing start. But the season's long. And there was many opportunities to get going again. But we had a tough second game. This was Thursday Night Football against the Eagles. The Eagles have been our bogey team in recent years, and they always seem to get the better of us. And that was the case again in this game. Again, the same theme, turnovers. 4 turnovers in this game. All fumbles. Just dreadful, absolutely dreadful. There were a couple of individual poor performances at the start of the year, Hockenson and Mattinson to name a few, but the fumbles just killed us completely. The play where JJ fumbled going into the end zone, I mean, that's just a silly rule altogether, and so it was ruled a touchback. The Vikings were in such a promising position, and that rule really needs to be looked at because it just doesn't help the offense at all. And if it's a fumble anywhere else going out of bounds, the offense still keeps the ball. So for the ball to bounce into the end zone and it to be turned over that way, it's just a little bit, it just doesn't sit right with me. Brian Flores' defense came into question a little bit this game as well. A little bit too aggressive on the blitz. We allowed the Eagles to make some big gains and allowed them a couple of easy scoring opportunities. The Vikings did come back though, but it was a little bit too late in the game. Final score 34-28. Yeah, 0-2. Classic Vikings, they've shown promise, they've shown that they can compete, but turnovers and the sloppiness is the killing the team really in this early stage. Next up, Chargers, must-win game. Cannot go to 0-3. The Chargers at that point were struggling as well. I think they were both sides were 0-2. And again, a couple of key turnovers, costly turnovers in that game. Vikings had the opportunity to win it. Kirk threw a bit of a dart to Hockenson. A little bit too much gas on that ball. A little bit out of Hockenson's reach. Hockenson tipped that ball up into the air. Interception by the Chargers, and that was that. The worst possible start for the Vikings, 0-3, nightmare stuff. Questions are really being asked of KOC and the offense. This team is too talented to be 0-3. But they did get the first win of the season against the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers throughout the season have been probably one of the worst in the league. And if they didn't win this one, heads would be on the chopping block, that's for sure. Didn't get off to the best of starts. A 99-yard pick 6 on the Vikings' first possession, which was great, absolutely fantastic. Cam Akers was brought into the team at that stage as well and showed promising signs. of a run game that had been stuttering at the start of the season. Nevertheless, the Vikings got an ugly win, a must-needed win, 1-3, roll on Kansas City Chiefs in week 5, and this is when things went from bad to worse. As always, the Vikings were competing, but in the third quarter, Justin Jefferson goes down with a hamstring injury. He didn't look comfortable. He tried to run with it, but was ruled out, and his 2023 nightmare became real. For the Vikings fans, knowing that they'd have to progress for a lengthy spell without JJ. Kelsey went down injured. There was a chance for the Vikings to really capitalise on that, but he came back out playing with a high ankle sprain and made the difference, secured the touchdown, and the Kansas City Chiefs got the win in the end, 27-20. There were a couple of bright moments in that game for the Vikings to look at. Brandon Powell stepped up well for the Vikings when they needed him, but ultimately turnovers again killed the Vikings. I think Josh Oliver turned over the ball in the first play of the game for the Vikings after a good gain, and that was just the Vikings' luck at that point in time. Their own forced errors completely costly. Against a team like the Chiefs, you can't have those. And yeah, 1-4, brilliant. We move to the next part of the season now, where the Vikings just went on an absolute tear. They pulled the fingers out, won 5 straight. The first starting with the Bears win, 19-13. Ugly win, but we'll take those. Justin Fields went down injured and Tyler Bagent came on. And he had a chance to win the game, to be honest with you. But Byron Murphy sealed the game-winning interception. And the team could breathe a big sigh of relief. Again, a team that the Vikings really should be beating on paper. 2-4 record. We moved to the 49ers, and this was a huge game on the calendar. Everyone knows that the 49ers are one of the most well-rounded teams in the league, and they've got some of the most talented offensive pieces on that side. I think most fans would agree that this was the Vikings' best game of the season. Kirk completely balled out. Some clinical third down throws. Hockenson stepped up big time this game after a sloppy start to the season. Kirk threw for 378 yards on the day. Used all of his weapons to his disposal without Justin Jefferson. Addison stepped up 2 touchdowns on the day. That one in particular where he ripped it out of the defensive back's hands and took it to the house. I mean, you could argue one of the only things that Kirk did wrong on that day was throw that ball a little bit underthrown. But Addison stepped up and snatched it, stops a certain interception, and kept the Vikings rolling. You can argue that for the 49ers that Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel were out, so he's a weakened 49ers side. But on the other hand, Justin Jefferson was out for the Vikings, and I really think that was the best performance of the season. Overall, the defense stepped up, the offense came to play, and they really stopped Brock Purdy from doing anything, and McCaffrey for that matter. Top performance. I truly believe that was a turning point to get them out of the rut that they dug themselves in at that stage of the season. Next up, the Green Bay Packers. The Vikings got the job done there, 24-10. The first 2-score win of the season. The team was rolling. Everything was looking good. And then, bam. An injury that completely changes the trajectory of the Vikings this year. Kirk Cousins pops his Achilles. It looked exactly like the Achilles injury Aaron Rodgers suffered early on in the season. You can see that pop in his calf. And it was absolutely soul-crushing for all Vikings fans. We tried to deny it. We tried to play it off as an ankle injury. We try not to fear the worst, but it was confirmed. Achilles tear, out for the season, and with JJ being out, with Kirk being out, it couldn't get much worse for the Vikings at that point in time. The Vikings still got the win in the end, but probably the most deflating win that you'll ever see, really. Towards the end of free agency, the Vikings picked up the former Cardinals quarterback, Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs had been a starter for the Cardinals this season, with Kyler Murray being out, and he showed promise in a pretty talented side at that stage. He's shown that he can use his legs for off-script plays. Put up a good victory against the Cowboys earlier on in the year. At the time, I deemed this as a good pickup, all things considering. I'm just excited to see what you can show in purple. Not in my lifetime of supporting the Vikings anyway, have had a quarterback that can really use their legs. And this Falcons game created the Passtronaut. Jaron Hall started the game, but then on his second possession, after a good drive, gets knocked out of the game, and enter Josh Dobbs. He had a couple of tough series when he first got the ball, completely looked out of his depth. I think he only had a few days to prepare. He didn't even have any reps with the first team, and he looked completely like a rabbit in headlights. Going into the third and fourth quarter, he really made the game his own. As I said, these off-script plays, which I don't think the Falcons were expecting at all. I don't think KOC expected at all either. And he was able to lead a game-winning drive for the Vikings, 31-28. And the hype was real at this point. The whole NFL world was talking about Josh Dobbs and can he take the Vikings to the promised land? You know, what he could achieve with his offense on less than a week's notice. Give him another week with the playbook and see what he can do then. And he did just that. The Vikings played the Saints next, and in one of the most easy, free-flowing halves of football that I've seen, Josh Dobbs and the Minnesota offense were 24-3 up. But something happened at half time. The team came out into the third quarter and took the foot off the gas. Play calling got conservative, and it really allowed the Saints to come back into the game. And Winston was just popping the ball all over the place. They did have a chance to level it up, but once again Murphy pretty much sealed the win with his interception. This theme of conservative play calling and not playing to Josh Dobbs' strengths really was the downfall of the Passtronaut. The Vikings won 5 straight, came back to 6-4. You know, everyone was thinking, you know, can this guy really take the Vikings all the way? They've had a terrible season through turnovers and through injuries, but can this really change the path of the Vikings? The loss to Denver really changed things. 3 turnovers. Dobbs was taking too long in the pocket. A little bit indecisive. The play calling again was too conservative. Poor game management at the end of the game. And just gave Russell Wilson too long. You know, a quarterback like that that's been in the league, been there, done that, made it too easy for him. And they got the touchdown towards the end of the game. Sutton with the jump ball, easy touchdown, and we just didn't have enough to go back and try and win the game. The next loss came against the Bears, divisional opponent, one that you just cannot lose if you're going for that divisional title. Ugly game. 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions for Josh Dobbs, and it really put the nail in the coffin in this Josh Dobbs era. Defense was stepping up, keeping the score low, but the offense couldn't do anything, couldn't get anything going. It just seemed like all that free-flowing, explosive football that was being played in the first half of the Falcons game had completely evaporated. It was stagnant, it was fearful, and we lost the fight. 6-6 record, and the roller coaster continues with one of the worst wins you'll ever see in a National Football League. Minnesota Vikings beat the Las Vegas Raiders 3-0. It nearly broke all records. It nearly went to overtime. Nick Mullins came into the game late after the offense just was completely dead and buried. Led somewhat of a drive down the field and let Greg Joseph win the game for the Vikings. It's almost embarrassing to win the game that way, but you'll take them. And it really overshadowed JJ's return to the team at that point. This last stretch of the season really killed all hopes of any playoff football. It really showed how much of the injuries took a toll on this team, in particular missing Kirk. The Vikings then lost to the Bengals in overtime. Jake Brown, and for goodness sake, man, you know, what was he screaming at the camera, trying to make a point why the Vikings cut him? Just get in the bin, lad. You know, again, the sloppiness crept into the Vikings game. Fair play T. Higgins, that was an incredible touchdown. But from a Vikings standpoint, could we have defended that better? There was 2 guys on him. I think Blackman was just standing there. Could he have had the opportunity to push him out of bounds? We have no idea. The game went to overtime. The Vikings had an opportunity to win the game, or at least score a field goal. But we tried to QB sneak it twice with Brandon Powell, one of the skinniest receivers on this team, trying to push Nick Mullins over the line. It was never going to work. Again, another example of poor game management. And gave the Bengals the opportunity to win the game with a field goal. Just our own downfall again, time after time after time. The Vikings then had a massive matchup on Christmas Eve against the Detroit Lions at home at US Bank Stadium, and they were in the fight. But again, turnovers reared its ugly head. Nick Mullins with 4 interceptions, tying Josh Dobbs' effort earlier on in the season. But at this point, the Vikings still controlled their own playoff destiny, with the teams around them losing. The division title was in Detroit's hands. About time. The first time they've won a divisional title in a long time. But the Vikings still had the opportunity to make the playoffs, regardless of all the injuries, regardless of how the season's been and gone. They still had the opportunity to get there themselves on their own merit, and they came out against the Packers and were completely and utterly flat. They got completely battered in that game, outfought. The Packers wanted it more. The defense looked like they completely checked out. It wasn't the Brian Flores defense that we'd all known earlier on in the season, and they made Jordan Love look like a top 10 quarterback. Just shocking, absolutely shocking. And that just felt like a real gut punch, really. The fan base and the players alike had been through a lot, an absolute roller coaster of a season, and to just go out like that, it was just naff, man. It was absolutely naff. The Vikings still had a miracle shot of getting to the playoffs going into the last game of the season against Detroit. They had to have a lot of help through other sides losing, and they had to go and beat Detroit in their own building, with Dan Campbell and his ultra aggressive nature playing his first team, although the third seed has already been wrapped up for them. Typical unlucky Vikings fashion, every single factor went against the Vikings' way. Firstly, they didn't beat the Detroit Lions. They lost 30-20. Nick Mullins was actually playing pretty well, to be honest, until that costly interception late in the game. Just Nick Mullins doing what Nick Mullins does best. I do like the guy. I saw his interview afterwards, and he was really showing a bit of emotion, saying he loves his team. And I have no doubt about that. You've got to respect the heart, and he plays with grit and determination. But when push comes to the shove, he does throw up a bit of a hospital pass, and if you want to be a top quarterback in the league, you can't be doing that. Having said that, JJ still got over 1K, 10 touchdowns for Addison, proving that they are going to be a duo to be feared for the rest of the league for many seasons to come. But yeah, Vikings lost, the Seahawks won, the Packers won, the Bucks won, and the Saints won as well. The Saints battered the Falcons. So every single factor went against the Vikings' way, and that pretty much summed up the theme of the season. Injuries, turnovers, inconsistent play calling. The defense really stepped up in the middle part of the season, but they really did drop off when we needed them at the end. And overall, it was just a disappointing season when there was a lot of expectation going into it. It's part of you that almost just wishes they just lost every game when Kirk went down. I almost think that'd be less painful than going through the ups, downs, the peaks, the troughs of the Passtronaut, and then going back down and almost making the playoffs, then completely crashing at the end. Where do we go next season? In my personal opinion, they have to re-sign Kirk. They have to. He's our best option winning going forward. There's rumours of a little bit of a discount. Is he going to take a bit of a cut? I think he will. I think it'll be a good deal for a top quarterback in this league. I think they'll work something out. And there are a number of top quarterbacks going in the draft, so maybe draft. I think we're number 11 in the draft, so maybe draft a good quarterback to just sit under Kirk and watch next year. Brian Flores, where will he end up? I mean, I think he'll have a pick of the head coaching jobs available. The Titans head coach has just been relieved of his duties, so I'd imagine that they'll be the two coaches that teams will want to go out and grab quick time. But if there is a little bit of a miracle there, to have Brian Flores back working on the defense will be incredible. Speaking of defense, I think this is Harrison Smith's last season with the Vikings. His performance this year has dipped a little from his high standards set in previous years. I think he's a very talented, smart guy outside of football, so I'm sure he'll have many other career opportunities, but I think this could be it. Unfortunately for Harrison Smith, one of my favourite Vikings over the years. In more positive news, Ivan Pace Jr. looks like a great linebacker going forward that could pick up a big chunk of responsibility. He had a great rookie year, and I'm expecting big things from him next year. JJ and Allison, Hawkinson, and Kirk, hopefully, and Cam Akers coming back should be great for the offense. The run game has been terrible this year, to be frank. So to try and build on that and try and create something with Ty Chandler and Cam Akers would be huge. I think Mattison, there were big things for Mattison this year with Dalvin going, but he just hasn't stepped up, unfortunately. But that pretty much sums up the Minnesota Vikings season, an absolute roller coaster of a year, as always. But hopefully we can bounce back and be competing for that divisional title next year. I'm sure that the Detroit Lions will be back again, and hopefully we can pip them to the post and be back where we belong, really, in the playoffs. But yeah, let us know your thoughts. How are you rating this season? What are some of your highs and lows of the 2023 Minnesota Vikings season? And yeah, we go again next year. But yeah, cheers for listening and watching, everyone. Peace out, and SKOL Vikes.